Okay, last time I'd asked you to pick a particular laptop. I gave you a choice of four different configurations, and they all cost the same amount, but they were different in one area. Okay, each one had a particular important specification. And let's take a closer look at one of those. Okay, configuration A, the key variable here, the key factor was this thing here, the CPU. Let's take a look at what this stuff means. Okay, first of all, the CPU itself. CPU looks like this. It's just a chip, and it's about 2 inches large. And in a laptop, it's even smaller, very small thing. And it's basically the engine of the computer. Okay, the CPU, it's really an acronym for Central Processing Unit. If you like acronyms, you can continue to say CPU. I'd rather speak English and call it just a processor. Okay, it is the processor in the computer. There are several on the market right now, things like the Intel Core 2, the AMD Athlon, and basically what the processor does is just interacts with the memory in the computer and does various types of calculations. We measure the speed of the processor by its clock speed or pulse. And nowadays that can range from 1.2 gigahertz to 3.2 gigahertz. Well, what is a hertz? Okay, hertz is not a measure of how many cars are rented per hour. Okay, 1 hertz is actually one operation per second. That's one addition, one subtraction, one division or multiplication per second. So, well, okay, well, what about that G? What does that stand for? Well, when we're talking about computers, we talk about really, really big numbers. And thousands, of course, if we have kilometers or kilometers, uh, kilo indicates 1,700 kilobits per second, which is somewhat slow speed nowadays. We have millions represented by mega, okay, as in megabytes, 3.4 megabytes being approximately 3.4 million bytes. Very easy to remember, huh? Millions, mega, okay. Well, what about billions? For billions, we say giga. Don't ask me why. Giga. Think of gigantic, billions, gigantic. The deficit of the country in billions of dollars. Actually, it's probably trillions by now, but think of billions being gigantically large. And in this case, gigahertz, gigahertz, that's 2.6 billion operations per second. Pretty fast, a lot faster than what I can do. Trillions, of course, we talk about trillions being tera, as in terabytes, and that's quite large. 1,000, approximately, a trillion bytes in a 2 terabyte drive, and even that is not that large anymore. We're talking sometimes about petabytes, quadrillions of bytes. Okay, 1,000 trillion bytes. Now, who's doing this? Well, obviously, it's the NSA. Okay, they're building a big facility out in Nevada, able to store something like 150 petabytes of information, all of our emails, I would guess. Okay, now there's a limit to how fast a processor can get. It's just the laws of physics. So what the manufacturers of the processors have been doing is taking two or more processors and sticking them together inside a single processor. That way, the computer could presumably do two or more things at once. Of course, that depends on the software. The software and basically the operating system has to support that. And when we talk about manufacturers, there's only two. And there are many manufacturers of PCs, but there's only two manufacturers of processors, just Intel and AMD. Intel is by far the larger company, but you can get pretty good and very good processors from AMD, and sometimes usually at a reduced cost compared to what Intel is selling. Okay, well, we talked about a processor here, the Intel Core i5, which is running at has two cores and is running at 1.6 gigahertz, which is pretty good. You'd be very happy with that for most applications. If you can afford it, you could move up to the Intel Core i7. Okay, it's a quad core and 2.4 gigahertz, and more cores and faster. Okay, now the only problem here is that systems that use this particular processor are going to be considerably more expensive than ones that use the i5. or even the Intel Celeron processor, which is even cheaper. Okay, now if you have the money, sure, go ahead and splurge and get this processor, but is it really worth it? Well, for most people, probably not. The bump up in speed you'll get from a processor like this is maybe only 10 or 15%, maybe 20%. And considering the initial cost, you may not even see, you may not even perceptually see the, the difference in speed. Okay, if you have big jobs, of course, it might be worth it, but it's up to you. And one thing, I mean, the processor is a very important component in the computer. Okay, one probably the one that determines the speed of the computer in general. But there are many other factors we'll see that will also control the speed of the PC, and we'll see that in our next presentation.